Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning and welcome to the challenge. As always, first and foremost, I'd like to thank God for another opportunity and thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. It is budget season, especially here in the greater Hartford area, and we are all concerned about what sort of priorities will be deemed appropriate and adequate for us during this particular budget time. We have with us the City Council Minority Leader, I believe, Dr. Larry Deutsch, who offers, I believe, a perspective for us that is unique and is here to talk about how he, if you will, in his representation of the minority's interest in this process, is evaluating those kinds of things that are deemed adequate and appropriate for us to continue with as a part of this season's budget. Welcome, Dr. Deutsch.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I tell you, we call this show The Challenge. It's really a challenge for, I think, most of us to understand just what a budget is. Can you tell us, if you will, in layman's term, as best as you can share with us or explain to us exactly what this thing called a budget is?
Sure. Well, I can try. Do my best. If you start with a budget on a personal level, some of us who are fortunate enough to have a job know we get so much money each week or each month, and then we have to spend it up to what we can, up to a certain limit, and it's our personal decision. Or if we have a companion or several companions, it's a collective decision as to how you receive and then spend the money. In the city, it's more complex, of course, and we're dependent also on our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters, our people up the street, and then many times there are some wealthy people that also make decisions beyond our ability to influence or understand. And this is the question. In a city budget, my opinion, you have so many parties, and some of them are interested in the city as a whole and their friends, their neighbors, their family, and some, our opinion, are interested in their pocketbooks, in their profits coming from the city, which is taxes that you pay to the city or to the state or the federal government, or other charges that you may have. You may just pay for some things and you don't know where the money is going, whose pocket it's lining. And one of the things, before I stop, is that we find here in this city, in this state, there's a lot of inequality in terms of who is paying the money and then who is benefiting from that. And that's true in a city budget where you have all these incomes, you have taxes, other government money, fees and so on, and then where's it going out? Who is it helping? Is it helping workers in the city? Is it helping families through social services? Or is it the source of a lot of, let's say, profit making by some big companies in downtown development? So that's a complicated way. We can get into the specifics.
Well, I'm interested, obviously, in your perspective as a minority interest, if you will, on the council, specifically because I think, by and large, as taxpayers, the residents, if you will, are considered the minority of the monies that are actually collected for taxes. I think that the majority of money or the majority of taxes are actually levied, if you will, or gathered or come into the city through corporations. Is that a fair statement?
You could say that many of the downtown corporations
or businesses,
and some of them are large companies. You know, the insurance companies,
sure,
the legal firms, and so on.
Right.
They pay some taxes, and of course, then some of those taxes go to benefit either the downtown or the rest of the city sometimes, and all of us have to watch over this process very carefully.
Well, sure, but I'm just getting at, you know, the budget. You know, the fact that we have a budget, it means that we collect, or we expect to collect, a certain amount of money.
Right. So some of that
that's that certain amount of money, if you will, that we collect, we should have an idea of what that is before we spend it. Correct?
That's right.
All right.
So I will just show for the viewers, if they're actually looking, that the city and any agency puts out these every year, these big budget books. I even hold it up.
Right.
And in these budget books, you will find many times pie charts, you know, things like this that shows where the money is coming from and where it's going. And so when you have a book like this, those are volumes of things, and I think the ordinary folks, we're counting on you, if you will, as a representative, to help us navigate through a lot of that. But let's if you will, let's try to, you know, keep it as simple as we can. All right.
And let's look at it as a typical household, like you said. You know, I think most people can relate to the fact that there's a certain amount of money comes into a home based upon the work or the revenues that, you know, are earned by the people who are in that household.
Right.
So, and the same is true for the city. There's a certain amount of revenue that is collected by the city that they have, you know, at their disposal to use to provide specific services to the residents of the city of Hartford.
Very good. So we think I should mention in response, when it said that I am the minority leader.
You represent the minority's interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no. You see, it's interesting.
Yeah.
People should know, in most cities, you have, especially in the Northeast, a Democratic and Republican structure. Mm-hmm. One party or another, and usually one is the majority, the other is the minority. Mm-hmm. That's just about every city in the United States. Sometimes you have a third party, and I happen to be representative of the third party called Working Families Party. Okay. I say not to be political, but in this case it's called minority, but we feel, since it's called Working Families, that it actually represents the majority of people in the city and not one economic or political interest. And that's why it's a smaller party, but it's coming up.
No.
It's called Working Families Party, and again, even though we're called minority, and I'm not part of the racial minority, let's say,
sure.
we feel that it's representing the interests of the majority. So here, on the budget, since it's a whole city, you have to see where is the money coming from into the city, who is it coming from, who is suffering the most taxes and paying the most out of their pocketbooks, and then where's the money going? Is it going to benefit the ordinary people in health services? Is it going to take good care of the roads? Is it going to manage things and hire workers in a fair and equity-minded way?
Uh-huh.
And so that's the expenditure side. So when you see all these graphs, when the money is coming from, let's say, some homeowners, that's some of it. It's coming from people who rent apartments. It's coming from their landlords. It's coming from the big companies and the small businesses, the restaurants and the gas stations and so on. So these are all the sources, and the first issue is who's going to pay more taxes and who's going to pay less, who's more needy and who's more able to pay. Supposedly, in this city, in this country, we have a structure where those more able to pay do so, and those less able to pay don't have to pay as much proportion. It's called progressive structure. But everyone knows, I think, that it doesn't work that well in some places. The United States as a whole has more disparities than any country in the world. In the state of Connecticut, on top, and the city of Hartford has disparities between rich and poor, the 1% and the 10% and all that. So, first thing when we make up a budget is we see are the taxes coming from the people who are most able to pay, or are they getting away with paying less than they should? Now, sometimes that's applied to corporations where they get tax breaks. And we in City Council, even next week, have to decide if a certain big insurance company in Asylum Hill will get a tax credit in order to expand its structure, or should they pay taxes just like everyone else? Because
and who decides upon how much of a tax credit a company or the policymakers or city council decides upon the amount of the tax credit?
Well, that's a good question, because when you say who decides, if you have a small business owner or a homeowner, do they go to the mayor and city council and say, well, I need a tax break because I just lost my job, or this and that? Is that equal to when you have a huge corporation going to the mayor and city council saying, we need a tax break, otherwise we'll move out or we'll move somewhere else? This is what happens. So it's the mayor and the city council have to look at this, but everyone in the real world knows they get influenced. And a big corporation may have a certain amount of influence because they pull many strings, whereas a homeowner or a small restaurant owner may not have the same influence.
And obviously the request for the tax break means that there's less of a tax liability or tax burden
on them,
on that particular entity.
Right. Okay. And that means, again, as you're saying, that means more of the tax burden comes on everybody else.
Okay.
And that's what we are very worried about. If a big company gets a tax break, it means the rest of us have to make up the difference.
Now, part of the revenues that come in to the city come from the state and or federal government, right, in the form of grants as well, right?
Yes.
Grants.
We get a lot of money from the state and federal government. It is true that the city is getting shortchanged from the state. It's been said, and everyone says this, the city council, the citizens, the mayors, that we have a higher portion of untaxable property in Hartford than any other city in the state. That means the hospitals, the churches, the government buildings, and the colleges. And Hartford has about over half. All of them, they don't pay taxes, so the rest of us make that up. That means we're paying for their police coverage, sanitation services, all these things. So the tax structure is that the state, which is supposed to be a wealthy state, needs to pay more to cover Hartford's needs, where they operate out of just a few blocks from here. So one thing, and the federal government, but everyone says they're squeezed. The state and federal government are not giving Hartford its due, for instance, for the school system. So the school system is dependent on the property tax.
And what kind of explanation do they give you as policymakers for not giving as much as they potentially could to the city like Hartford that provides those services? Or do they give you an explanation, or don't they have to?
Simplest explanation is that even though the legislation says they should give us a certain amount as payment in lieu of taxes, that's P-I-L-O-T, they say, well, we don't have enough money, so we'll only give you 40% of what we should be giving in order to make up this tax situation. So the state says, well, we don't have it, so we'll give you what we can.
And the law allows the state to do that.
It certainly does.
Now, so what that sounds like to me is that the state and the federal government, if you will, to me, it sounds like to me we have a system problem here, because it sounds like to me that they have sort of a monopoly, if you will, and it's a legalized monopoly, if you will, that allows them to do whatever they deem is appropriate, given a certain set of circumstances.
Right. That's the income side. So many of us in Hartford and the other cities, that means Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, think the cities are being shortchanged. And I have to bring in now, to be honest with the viewers, some of this is a societal and a racial issue, where the structure is not giving the due to people who happen to be the minorities, the religious and racial minorities who live in cities.
Wow. In urban areas.
In urban areas, many people feel that the powerful political structure, statewide, countrywide, the wealthy Republicans and Democrats and so on, are not caring for the cities the way they should. And it happens, the worst example I know in the United States was New Orleans, where that that whole city went underwater literally.
Right.
Because the power structure failed to support it the way
Right.
it should.
Right.
And everyone knows who was the population in New Orleans. The poor people,
Right.
minority people
Right.
suffered.
Right.
And it's happening in a slower way to Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury, and so on, where the cities are not getting their due, given that they offer culture and
Right.
services
Right.
to the whole
Right.
population.
Right.
This-
Yeah, that's very, very telling, Dr. Deutsch, and I think most folks want to hear, more about that. That's probably a show in and of itself.
It is.
I think that that kind of disparity, if you will, tends to be, looked past for whatever reason, and I think it's because of our inability to engage in the political process. And it seems like to me that what we're counting on is woefully inadequate when we hope that there are people who are on council or who are policymakers that can do use their positions to change some of those dynamics in terms of what we're getting in terms of services and or really what's fair,
Right.
The
term
from
very good.
the government that is supposedly there to protect us all.
Right. I mean, the term we use, it's not just working families use it, but many people now, is they say we have talked about racial justice, but we also need to talk about economic justice.
Absolutely.
Economic justice means jobs that we should have. And for instance, in Hartford, our people are not, the city's people are not employed fairly the way they should be, training if need be. For instance, the huge MDC water project.
Right.
You look, most of the workers are not from Hartford.
Right.
And we have fought in the city and the state to get more jobs for our people, but the unemployment rate in Hartford is still...
I noticed that came up quite a bit last night at the public comment section of the budget. The residency issue, a lot of the people who actually use a lot of the services that the city provides don't even really live in the city. And even the ones who are supposedly providing the service, who work on behalf of the city, don't actually live in the city.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are sometimes, let's go stay to the budget. The benefit goes to many people who do not live in the city.
Right.
Whether it's a worker on the sewer pipes or a high-paid consultant.
Right.
In the education system.
Right.
Many times the money is going out of the city, and in this structure, the people who are paying live in the city.
Right.
Because we don't have a structure, for instance, education, where the state pays equally for every child in the state.
Right.
It's left up to the city to raise its own taxes and pay the teachers and all these extra principals that they have now. That's a whole other show.
No, I know.
The education system.
Sure.
But as you're saying, in terms of revenue and expenses, how much is coming from people in the city, and are they getting the benefit from all that they pay, whether it be a pothole in the street or an extra teacher in their child's school, or is the money instead going to a few people? They may work hard, but how much money do they need? Some of them.
This budget process is kind of complicated.
It is
complicated. But it I think can be a lot simpler, if you will. I think if I think if those who want to make it simple would actually think of it in simpler terms, because even though you don't know exactly how much money you're going to have in any budget season, to me, if you are trending it, if it happens over consecutive years, which is what has happened in the city of Hartford, you've come up with shortfalls, where you've not had enough to pay for a year's worth of services. It would seem to me that would be an indication that there's be some changes made.
Absolutely. Yes.
That wouldn't keep you trending in a deficit.
Right.
So last night the mayor's budget was still dealing with a deficit. Well, was dealing with again an additional deficit, and so why is it that we keep, and I know you lose companies, people move out of the cities, there's obviously some volatility, but why is it that we keep running into these deficits year after year after year when we know approximately how much we can anticipate in terms of revenue, but we don't seem to be able to get a handle on the things that we're spending?
Well, this is where all the controversy comes in. Let's say in terms of revenue, that means the money we take in.
Right.
Some people will say, well, just raise taxes. And last night, many people said, look, that's going to fail. Because just because you raise taxes doesn't mean you get that much more, because some people will move out.
Right.
They'll quit the city, move to Newington or West Hartford or somewhere else.
Right.
So that's not an answer.
Right.
The mayor has said, and many of us disagree, well, just sell some of the property the city owns. And so even the newspaper, which is not a radical paper, said don't sell the furniture. Do they want to sell some buildings on Main Street, city buildings, in order to get some money? Most of all, do they want to sell all the downtown parking?
Right.
Even though it's going to the pension fund, it's complicated. But some politicians, mayor and city council, to fix their budget, they'll say, well, sell this, sell that, sell something else. And that's a one-year fix.
Right.
Doesn't say anything about, well, what are you going to sell next year? And there were jokes, even in our newspaper, that next year are they going to sell the statues downtown? Are they going to sell City Hall? People joked about that. You can only sell your things so much, and then you got nothing.
Right.
The old joke is don't sell your seed corn, or don't overfish the lobsters. Don't sell your tools if you're a carpenter. You may need money, but then what are you going to do in the future?
Right.
So one thing we reject, that's working families and some of the Democrats, is each year having a one-year budget fix that makes the politicians and maybe council and the lawyers look good, but then the next year you suffer worse. It's short-term thinking.
Sure.
So we need to first think about, if you or I are going to live here 5, 10, 15 years from now, you can't make budgets year after year by selling this, selling that, and selling something else. You'll have no clothes.
And to continue to raise taxes either.
Right. So that'll work. So it would take a long time for us to say, well, how are we going to have a steady state? One thing we feel is we're very critical of the mayor this way, honestly. When he wants to lay off workers in the city, that has consequences. It doesn't just save the city money because you lay off the very people that live and work in the city, pay taxes, give services. You lay them off, you strip the city of the people power to have a livable city. And so that's not an answer either. Layoffs it's a crime really against those families and the whole city.
Sure.
So we're firmly opposed to layoffs, especially the people who deliver the services. We don't mind laying off a high-paid manager or two. We don't always need them, and sometimes they fatten the top end at high salaries. And this goes to the education system as well. We have a lot of people making well over $100,000 a year when they could condense things a little bit. And those people making over $100,000, a lot of them live out of town also. So a short answer to our question about the revenue and expenditures is some people feel that the ordinary people are getting ripped off. When they pay high taxes, they get fired or laid off. And yet the structure of lawyers, politicians, development companies, banks, doing just fine in this economy. I have to say very... Now, we'll get into the structure of the revenue. When you look at taxes, the word is the tax incidence or the tax burden. Is the tax burden falling mostly on the ordinary people, the poor people can't afford it? Or are the wealthy people paying what they really should, unless they make excuses saying, if you tax us too much, we'll just move out of the city. Sometimes that happens, and sometimes it's a bluff. Sometimes it's a gun to our head and a bluff, where they threaten us to move out, and we have to judge. That's where everyone listening has to come in and say, if the Hartford Insurance Company or Aetna something says, if they don't get a tax break, they'll move out, is it really serious, and does it impact our people? Or is it just pressuring us to give them more breaks? That's the revenue thing.
Well, I have a thought. If the city is even considering giving a tax break as an incentive to a company who is already well established and who obviously is successful to a great degree, because if you're talking to Hartford Insurance Group, that's a Fortune 100 company.
Certainly is.
So if you're going to do that, then why can't the citizens themselves participate in the profits and in the dividends
Wonderful.
that those companies generate?
Yes, sir. I'm so glad you bring that up. There's a new concept, and I call on the citizens to do this. If they're going to get a tax break, let's say that some people say they need it or they deserve it. In return, what do we get? And
Right.
how do we write it down
Right.
and enforce it? This is called
Right.
now a concept many cities have called Community Benefits Agreements, CBA. Remember that, Community Benefits Agreements, where they don't get their tax break unless they meet with the community.
Right.
They say, well, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll guarantee in writing enforcement,
Right.
either a playground, a daycare center, fixing some streets, having some open services for the city, and I don't mean just support.
I think it can go far beyond that.
Of course.
Yeah, because companies that size. I mean, you're talking about a company that does. I mean, $70-80 billion.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the city of Hartford only has a $500 million budget.
Right.
I mean, so with those kinds of numbers, I mean, you would think that they would want their city if they were a good partner.
That's
if
right.
they were, really appreciative of the talent pool that they have in and around those areas.
That's right.
That they want to do more.
Right. So what you often find, and again, this is up to the people to speak on, when you have what's called a public-private partnership.
Right.
In some cases, the cities get outsmarted by the companies, and the partnership is not equal the way it should be. And some people have more influence. So we're now saying, like some other cities, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, many cities around the country, whenever there's a tax break for a development downtown, we want a written and signed community benefits agreement with the neighborhoods, the NRZs or the people, saying this is what we need and this is what we want before we will consider forgiving some of your taxes. It's just like a give back, but it has to be truthful. So that 5 or 10 years from now, our children won't say, why aren't they enforcing this thing? Where are the lawyers? Why aren't they making sure that we get what's due? And saying, what was the mayor and city council thinking when they gave away this, but they didn't protect the city in the future?
Right.
Community, and so what I would like to ask of anyone who's listening, if you have any suggestions that your block or your neighborhood needs or the city needs, send it in to any of us and say, we want this as part of every community benefits agreement. A lot of it has to do with jobs too. They often promise jobs to the local residents, but then they say, well, we can't find someone with this ability, or we can't. We looked, but we couldn't find enough people. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's just excuses. We want jobs as the first element of any community benefits agreement. Jobs that are not just low paid and go away when the company leaves. Good job. For instance, I'm going on too long, but some of the insurance companies, they say jobs, but they'll give, let's say, 20 jobs to people who work in the cafeteria. Might be minimum wage and so on. Do they train people at a high level in manufacturing, use of computers and so on, jobs that will last, skills they need? Not always, no. Sometimes the jobs go still to people who live out of town, and the people in Hartford don't get the long-term benefit of jobs that are well-paying, highly trained and so on. It's not fair, and the people need to tell all of us, not just me, but the whole council and the mayor especially, no tax breaks unless there's a community benefit that we sign off on, and that 10 years from now somebody will look over and see, are they meeting what they promised?
I think that's a lot of food for thought. I think that's something that deserves a lot more attention and a lot more time. Our show, unfortunately, does not allow for us to get into a lot of the details that I know you and I both feel very passionately about. But I will offer this platform to you, again, so we can talk about some specific things. I think education obviously is a huge issue when it comes to the budget. I think public safety is a huge issue when it comes to a budget. I don't think you have a city unless you have public safety and those kinds of things. But I do wonder whether or not most of us are really aware of what this budget process means and how we're either thought about as a part of the budget process or either we're not. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the citizenry has turned into almost like casualties.
Right.
It would seem, because it would seem that by and large most people feel like some people are just going to be left out.
That's right.
And you hear the conversation and the dialogue all around us suggesting that, and even in a statement by Donald Sterling, the owners of the Clippers, people are property. And it's really kind of sad commentary that during this particular time, that's the sentiments of those who are so well off and endowed, who have more than they really need, and their lack of empathy and compassion for those who are less fortunate. Dr. Deutsch, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have you here this morning.
Likewise.
We'll look forward to the next time. I know your schedule's really busy, and I know this is a really busy time for you. I salute you.
Well, I salute you too. I wish we had more
yes.
time to go into particulars, and people should come around, and they should bug the politicians and lawyers. They should come around anytime they have a question and not settle for less than a good answer.
I agree.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more. This has been the challenge during budget season here in the city of Hartford, the state where we're considered the wealthiest per capita, dealing with issues in urban centers where we seem to be an afterthought. We want to thank Dr. Deutsch for coming in and being our guest. Again, our platform here at accesstv.org is open to him and to others to share their perspective. But remember, be blessed.